Watching and listening to your home for Greater West Bloomfield news. Civic Center TV and 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, West Bloomfield, Kego Harbor, Sylvan Lake. 89.3 Lakes FM. It's the Megacast, an hour-long TV and radio streaming show keeping you informed on the day-to-day news. Live from West Bloomfield, we're bringing you the news, updates, and information impacting communities around Michigan. Join our host, Tyler Kieft, as he talks with community members, business leaders, and professional experts about the stories that impact you. You're watching the Megacast on Civic Center TV.
When the temperatures are chilly, being together warms the soul. Keep the winter fun going. Help protect yourself and those around you by keeping your COVID-19 vaccines up to date.
1 in 4 Michigan homes has high levels of radon, a naturally occurring radioactive gas known to cause lung cancer. It doesn't matter where you live or what type of home you have. You won't even know it's there unless you test. So don't wait. Testing is cheap and easy. And if there's a problem, it's simple to fix. Visit michigan.gov/radon to learn more.
We took action. Will you?
You're listening to your radio homes for the Megacast, 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake and 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills. Today's edition of the Megacast begins now. Welcome to the Megacast, our live daily TV, radio, and streaming show talking about all things Michigan. I'm Tyler Kieft. Today we'll be talking to a number of people about topics of interest and importance to Michiganders just like you. Let's begin with what's making headlines on our local news page on civiccentertv.com. And look at our first article coming from Bill Leitner at the Detroit Free Press. Just as one storm's impact comes to almost a close, another storm may be on its way. Keep an eye out on forecasts for potential snowstorm on Friday. That all according to the National Weather Service's local office and Stephen Freitag, a meteorologist, who says that there's a potential for, quote, big snow, and unfortunately it looks like heavy snow that will stick to trees along with wind, and closed quote. But don't panic or writhe in agony just yet. Freitag also mentioned how suspect forecasts have been lately in our local weather patterns, so meteorologists are continuing to monitor the potential for a storm on Friday, as those forecasts have been especially tough to nail down in the southern counties of the state as of late. And just happens to be that those southern counties of the state of Michigan have been where a lot of these storms have had such a heavy impact. We think about last week, Wednesday, just a week ago. Today, we were all focused on the ice storm coming through. And boy, after a more nonchalant start than we had expected to the storm, it really hit hard late on Wednesday and into Thursday, causing a number of different power outages and residual outages as storms came as the storm damage continued on, and as repair crews went out to fix some of that damage and fix some of those outages, others also were caused along the way. And so we really had extensive coverage last week of the ice storm, and it's continued on a week later as many still without power in our local area. They were told by DTE Energy that they expected to have the power fully restored by Sunday. That didn't happen. Then they moved the goalpost forward to Tuesday, and still, even after yesterday, many people here in Oakland County still out of power. There's been some stories out of Berkeley that a lot of the residents there are very dissatisfied with the way that their power has been out throughout this storm and as a result of this storm and afterwards as well, with much of that city being out of power earlier on this week and definitely late last week, and with plenty to complain about to DTE Energy, who is the sole provider in some of these local areas. Plenty of people dissatisfied once again with DTE Energy, all as they're looking to raise your rates potentially as high as almost 14%. 13.9% is the rate hike that they are seeking from the Utility Regulatory Commission here in the state of Michigan. all while this is going on and people still out of power. If you're curious about just how much of our local area is struggling with their power at this time, we have a page on our website at civiccentertv.com/ice where you can find all of that information, and we'll update it as we approach Friday and the potential for a snowstorm right here in southeastern Michigan that could cause further power outages because it's expected to be heavy snow, to be packing snow. It will land on the power lines. It's going to be freezing cold temperatures as well, and all of that can once again contribute to more delays, more issues, more power outages, delays in solving some of these power outages because who knows how far forward DTE Energy and consumers may move the goalposts on resolving last week's power outages. It may go as far as, well, now we got to wait for Friday and see how that affects everything as well. But credit to those crews that have been out and about all throughout our community since last Wednesday, working around the clock and working really hard in sometimes very unsettling conditions weather-wise outside to restore power to our local area. They have been doing an amazing job, as they always do in these really tough situations. So much pressure on them from the company, certainly from the public, and they're people like you and I too. They know what it's like to live without power in their homes and how much of an inconvenience that can be, how much of a pain in the you-know-what that can be for people just trying to live their everyday life. And so they're out and about working and doing hard work as well to restore power. And so a lot of credit needs to be given to them through this effort, as much as we like to complain as customers of DTE or as customers of Consumers Energy about the power continuing to be out. They've restored power to hundreds of thousands of people. That doesn't happen without these line workers going out there and working around the clock for several days on end, long days, tough work, tough conditions, all for you in the community. So big credit to them as well. So we might get hit with a whole lot of snow, or depending on the weather patterns, it could all veer south of us toward Detroit. That's where it's currently sort of trending right now. But there's a question of whether or not that storm may push a little bit further north and come toward us in Oakland County and hit parts of northern Wayne County as well with the snow. We're expecting some rain as well in that event. And we'll keep you all updated on civiccentertv.com/ice as that's approaching. And of course, here on this program on Thursday and on Friday morning, as we do our live shows at 10 a.m. and runs through 11 a.m. in case any of this becomes a major storm like it could potentially be, or it could just be another one that passes through some rain, maybe a little bit of snow, and doesn't have as much of an impact. The jury is still out on that. Meteorologists working very hard right now to try to nail down exactly what's going to happen with the storm. They don't want to be too alarmist, and neither do we. We don't want to speculate and don't want to be too alarmist with this storm and tell you that you need to stock up and be ready for several days because it's going to be a snowmageddon. There's going to be snow all over your house. You're going to have your windows covered in snow. Whoa, oh, no. That's not what we're doing here. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with this storm. That being said, it's always best to err on the side of caution. And so before you stow away that generator and think that winter is over after that last ice storm, maybe keep it handy for a little while because you may need it in the next coming days here in the Oakland County area. All of this, of course, comes as hundreds of thousands were out of power over the last week, with some stragglers still having their outages yet to be resolved by DTE Energy. And again, the DTE Energy power outage map, as well as Consumers Energy, is all on our website at civiccentertv.com/ice. We also have some very helpful information and advice. So if you're preparing for the potential for another power outage, or if you're experiencing a power outage, but you're at work during the day in the warmth of your office, and then you're going back home and need some more materials to help weather this power outage as it continues on, or maybe, hopefully, by the end of today is resolved for your home or your business, civiccentertv.com/ice. That's the place you're going to want to go. Plenty of really helpful information there to help you through this. Again, civiccentertv.com/ice, and we will do our best to keep that updated throughout the day today and Thursday and into Friday, should this storm take effect here in our local area and potentially be a big snow event, a big snowstorm potentially on Friday. You can also learn more by going to our local news page, clicking through this article from Bill Leitner at the Detroit Free Press, and read even more helpful information, learn more from his interview with Steve Freitag from the National Weather Service. And we will also have this posted on our website, on our local news page early on this afternoon after we complete this morning's show. Big morning here at Civic Center TV, and I'm pulling double duty, so some things had to take a little bit of a pause before today's show. That includes the posting of these articles, but they will be on our website. I will do that first thing after finishing today's edition of the Megacast and our live show at 11 a.m. In the meantime, I've been going nonstop since 9:30. Got to take a sip of coffee here because otherwise you're not going to understand a word I'm saying for the next few minutes. So here we'll go pinkies up because we're classy here at the Megacast. There we go. Now we're back in business over here. Also making headlines on CivicCenterTV.com's local news page from a whole host of journalists on the team at Bridge, Michigan. Michigan State University plans to change its building security protocols, and they will do that on March 13th, 1 month to the date following a mass shooting that took the lives of 3 students and left 5 others in critical condition in Sparrow Hospital, 4 of which remain hospitalized in various conditions, including one in critical condition at this time, with 1 student having been released last week and now beginning his recovery with his family in Florida. They're going to be tightening restrictions on building access starting on March 13th. In this report from Bridge, Michigan, it was mentioned by Emily Gurkin-Garant, who is one of MSU's spokespeople. They had said that Monday through Friday from 6 p.m. until 7:30 a.m., all buildings will require key card access. So that's night classes, that's people that want to be studying in MSU buildings, such as the library or dormitories or other public buildings and class buildings and so on and so forth. They're going to have to use their key card in order to get in. Students do have their student ID that will serve as their key card. It serves as their ID card, as their key card for the dorms. I know, at least it did back in my day at Michigan State. I would presume that's still how that works now. And buildings across the campus will have restricted access from either 11 p.m. or 11:30 p.m. until 7:30 a.m. So again, buildings will require key card access at MSU from 6 p.m. until 7:30 a.m. on Monday through Friday. Certain buildings are going to also have restricted access and may require even more permissions through your MSU security card for these individuals that do have access to these buildings in order to get in. That begins in just a couple of weeks on just under a couple of weeks on March 13th. Grant also said members of the public can still use these buildings. That's been part of this big debate because it's a public university, Michigan State University. It's a public university. It's right there in the middle, in the heart of the East Lansing community, and in the Lansing community, a lot of people go to campus to go for a walk because it's a gigantic campus. It's a beautiful campus. A lot of alums live locally or come in to visit and like to reminisce and go through a lot of these buildings. And they've always been open to the public, and that's something that MSU has been really proud of for a number of years. But now, following the wake of this shooting, that coming into question, how public should these buildings be? How much access should the public have, especially while school is in session? And these are primarily being utilized as educational buildings, and they need to be safe and secure for the students, for the staff, and the faculty. That becoming even more apparent and even more of a priority following the shooting on February 13th. So exactly 1 month later, on March 13th, here just a week from this coming Monday, MSU will begin restricting access to certain buildings from 11 p.m. or 11:30 to 7:30 a.m., and buildings will require key card access from 6 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. on Monday through Friday as well. Students are on spring break beginning on Monday through Friday of next week, giving the university time to finalize this, to troubleshoot these plans and make sure that they can go into full effect when students do return to campus after their spring break, which again begins on Monday. So they'll go through the rest of this week under their current normal operations, and those security measures will be going in place on Monday, March 13th, just a week from this coming Monday. And you can read more information and stay up to date on Bridge, Michigan's extensive coverage of the shooting at Michigan State University, as well as the wake of that shooting, with plenty of updated information, and you can kind of read how it's progressed over time as well. That article will be on our website, CivicCenterTV.com, on our local news page. Finally, making headlines today on our local news page, coming from Tanya Wilt, also at the Detroit Free Press. A really interesting story, a funny story, actually. As an Oakland County man, did what many of us do and purchased a lottery ticket, and his lottery game of choice was, of course, the Fantasy 5. So he purchased a few tickets, filled out a few tickets, and figured out he had some winning tickets as well. 2 winning tickets were sold for the Fantasy 5 drawing. And a 67-year-old man who was one of the winners found out he was both of the winners and is splitting the prize with himself. That prize being $240,338, the jackpot, after his winning numbers of 4, 10, 12, 20, and 30 were selected by the Michigan Lottery in the Fantasy 5. He said the following in this article, quote, "Every week I purchase multi-draw Fantasy 5 tickets with the same set of numbers I've been playing with for 4 years. I was going out of town, so I bought a multi-draw ticket to cover the drawings while I was gone. I logged into my lottery account after the drawing to check my tickets, and I couldn't believe it when I saw $240,338 in prizes pending. And then when I realized I had won on one of the drawings, both tickets covered to win $120,169 each, I couldn't help but laugh," he said, as he realized that the only competition he had in the Fantasy 5 in this particular drawing was himself, ultimately taking home the entire jackpot. But, of course, alarming when you see that you've won on one ticket, you've won on the other ticket, and find out both of them are jackpot tickets, and ultimately you're still getting to the same result, a cool $240,338 heading this man's way. He says he wants to use the money toward his son's education, and then he'll save the rest of it in the meantime. What a great story, and a funny story, but also a happy story as well for this man right here in Oakland County, who was able to win the Fantasy 5 and really only had one person he had to split the money with as he pulled it together, and that was himself. That story will be on our website as well, civiccentertv.com, on our local news page. And on our local news page, we have a ton of resources there at the top also for public health information as we continue on. And of course, it's early in the month of March, the first day of March here in 2023. And this is the month that we all kind of look back at the COVID-19 pandemic as just 3 years ago, coming up on 3 years ago, our lives changed forever as Michigan shut down, as the state did, our local area, the country really in many ways shut down as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course now things much different. COVID-19 still spreading. The pandemic, it may have been declared over by the President of the United States, but COVID-19 is still spreading throughout our local communities and around the world. And there's plenty of public health information, not just on the COVID-19 front, but on seasonal flu and other issues that may pop up in your local area or here in the state of Michigan that we should be aware of. From the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the Oakland County Health Division, all of which you can click through on our website, on our local news page at civiccentertv.com and learn more information. So if you click through to any of those links, it will take you to the direct COVID-19 pages. And then from there, you can navigate their website to learn more about other public health information and issues, read some of the research that's being done by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention out of Atlanta, Georgia, the state of Michigan's Health and Human Services Department out of Lansing, and the Oakland County Health Division as well in Pontiac, with plenty of information as well on testing and so on, and other resources on a number of public health fronts. It's a great resource we have for you still on our website, civiccentertv.com, on our local news page. And of course, going back to the big news right now on the weather front, a storm expected to come through on Friday. It may be mostly rain and a little bit of snow. It could be a major snowstorm right here in Oakland County, depending on where that weather pattern finishes its trajectory in the next couple of days. As we approach Friday, the forecasts are still kind of up in the air at this moment in time, as the National Weather Service not entirely sure what is going to happen with that storm. Currently, it's predicting that it's going to look like it may go toward the Detroit area, but it may veer north and go toward us in Oakland County, which could lead to, of course, inclement road conditions. So you want to be able to plan out a little extra time if you're traveling on Friday throughout the state, or if you plan to go home a little bit early on Friday and your route may be a little bit obstructed or maybe slower than usual. Give yourself plenty of time and be ready to be patient out on the roads on Friday. We could potentially have a winter storm that's currently going through the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes region. Heavy precipitation is expected with that system, and it could be a significant mixed precipitation or snow possible for the local area. And that's already there. Listen, you can read that full report updated from the National Weather Service's Detroit Pontiac office out of White Lake on our website, civiccentertv.com/ice. In addition to that, on our ice page at civiccentertv.com/ice, you'll have links to the power outage map from Detroit Edison, DTE Energy, as well as from Consumers Energy. If you're still out of power, if you know people that are still out of power, maybe some estimates on when that power outage may be complete, or to report a power outage if this snow event does come through on Friday and have an impact on our community. You're going to want to be able to report that to DTE Energy and to Consumers Energy so that they can put in a ticket and be ready to resolve that power issue in your local area and help you out as much as is needed. So all of that is on our webpage, civiccentertv.com/ice. And of course, all these headlines from today's show, we will have those posted for you shortly after we conclude today's program on civiccentertv.com on our local news page, where you'll also find all of our articles from throughout the week that are making headlines and keep up to date, whether you watch us live on our shows from Monday through Friday, weekdays 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., watch us live or watch us live to tape, or you're just looking for those most important news stories right here in Oakland County in your local area throughout the week as you're going along in your busy day. All of that is on our website, civiccentertv.com. Just click on the local news page at the top of our homepage, civiccentertv.com, for all of those resources. We have a great show coming on up on today's edition of the Megacast. Up next, the Detroit Red Wings have been hot and cold as of late, still in the hunt for a playoff spot with the trade deadline approaching. What will GM Steve Yzerman do? Is this team ready for a playoff push, or does this rebuild need to push out one more offseason before this team is ready to make a push for the playoffs? Stay tuned. We'll have Ansar Khan, the Detroit Red Wings beat writer with MLive, joining us next to talk about that and more on the Megacast.
I'm Steve Yzerman of the Detroit Red Wings, and I think every child in Michigan deserves a safe, healthy, and happy childhood. Can we build a state where Children Trust Michigan isn't just a name, but something our kids believe? Please support Children Trust Michigan as the voice for children and families by visiting the website to learn more.
Wondering what to say to someone who's been sexually assaulted or abused?
I believe you. I'm so sorry this happened.
It's not your fault.
Confidential and anonymous help is available at the Michigan Sexual Assault Hotline. Connect with us 24/7. Call 855-VOICES-4 or text 1-866-238-1454 for help. Learn more at michigan.gov/voices4. Now that the vaccine is available for children 5 and up, why do you recommend it?
Kids are part of the community and they can spread COVID.
We're seeing both healthy children getting sick from the virus as well as children with underlying health conditions.
They can easily bring the virus home to other people that are vulnerable and make them sick as well.
This vaccine can change that and keep children safe.
It's essential that your children get vaccinated to protect them, to protect your families, and to protect those in the community around you.
Welcome back to the Megacast, our live daily TV, radio, and streaming show talking about all things Michigan. I'm Tyler Kieft. You can learn more about our program on our website, civiccentertv.com/megacast, where you'll also find more information on all of our partnering stations across the Great Lakes State, including right here in Oakland County, and watch us on demand on your time. You can always join us Monday through Friday, live from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., but we understand it. It's middle of your workday. If you can't join us live, you can always find us on demand, as well as each individual interview on our website at civiccentertv.com/megacast. Joining us now on the program is the Detroit Red Wings beat writer for MLive, as the Red Wings are pushing for a playoff spot in the Eastern Conference in the National Hockey League, but of late have had some spells of hot and cold as they continue to compete on the ice. Ansar, thanks for joining us today.
I'm glad to be with you.
Yeah, glad to have you with us too, because it's an interesting time in Red Wings hockey. It's one of the few teams that we've had here in the Detroit area of late that's been right in that hunt for the playoffs. Of course, the Lions had a late playoff push in the fall and just came up short. And now the Red Wings in a kind of a similar situation. They were surging there for a while with a nice game against the New York Rangers last week, Thursday, 4-1 victory, a win against the Capitals before that on Tuesday, albeit without Alexander Ovechkin playing. But of late, that defense has really taken a turn for the worst as they've dropped a couple of games, giving up 12 goals in the last 2 games, both to the Ottawa Senators, and then being shut out by the Lightning before that. So where is this Red Wings team at? Is it ready to compete for a playoff spot?
It's right on the fringe. Like you said, things were going well. Even in their Saturday game against Tampa Bay, they played a really good game, and they really dominated that game. Vasilevsky stole it for the Lightning. They went into a key back-to-back with Ottawa. I think realistically hoping that if they could split, that would have been a good trip. Lost both, and not only is it the fact that they lost both, it's the way that they lost those games. They were really dominated physically, and just breakdown after breakdown defensively. Too many odd man rushes. They let the Senators basically roam free behind them for breakaways and really hung their goalies out to dry. It was really I describe it as a discouraging trip. Kind of a slap in the face, really. Ottawa was 4 points behind them. Now they're tied with them. There are, I think, about 7 teams that are in the hunt there for the final 2, for the 2 wildcard spots that are separated by 6 or 7 points. So the Red Wings are right on the fringe there. But certainly it's going to take, it's probably going to take like another run like they had before the stretch where they went on a 7-1 run, something along those lines to really get back into this thing.
And that's where it really comes back to the front office, or at least the discussion amongst fans, amongst pundits on the hockey front is, what will Steve Yzerman do as we're approaching the trade deadline this week, and an opportunity for the Red Wings that they really believe that this team can get into the playoffs and maybe even be competitive in the early rounds. Do they become buyers at the trade deadline, or are they looking at some of their impending free agents, like particularly Tyler Bertuzzi, as someone that they can trade and get some more assets and accelerate this rebuild in the offseason and look more toward next year as that point? So in your discussions with Steve Yzerman at the front office, with this coaching staff, where do they believe that they're at right now? Should we be expecting them to be buyers or sellers at this trade deadline?
Well, they keep their cards close to the vest there. Don't say a whole lot, really anything. So we're just left to speculate. But Bertuzzi really is the key guy there. He's the main trade chip, maybe really the only one at this point after they signed Oli Mata and Jake Wallman recently to extensions. So they're here. Those were 2 other pending unrestricted free agents that probably certainly would have drawn some interest in the trade market. But right now, it's Bertuzzi is the main one as far as their pending unrestricted free agents. And my guess is that if they do trade him by Friday, it's not going to be for futures. It's not going to be for draft pick or prospects or anything like that. I think they're going to want to bring in a player or 2 that can help them right away, almost as a replacement for Bertuzzi, somebody that can step into the lineup right away and help them with this playoff push. And I don't believe it'll be a rental either. I don't think Steve Yzerman's in a position or wants to add a guy that he's just going to lose in the summer for nothing. I think it would be somebody who's under contract for at least another year or 2. And ideally, as we saw them get pushed around in Ottawa, really the past 2 games, Bertuzzi is one of those few guys that can push back and plays with that grit and the physicality. So if they lose him, ideally they would like somebody who can kind of fill that void too. The question is whether they can find that guy here in the next 48 hours. But I also think that if Steve Yzerman doesn't feel that he's getting a good return, that he'll basically just keep Bertuzzi and hope that the team can go on a push here. And basically, at that point, they would probably lose him for nothing as a free agent, unless they can somehow, over these next few months, come to an agreement. But right now, from what I understand, they're pretty far apart and nowhere close to a contract extension.
And right now, there's some glaring holes in this Red Wings team. There's some glaring issues that really need to be addressed if this team's going to win games and compete to build those points in order to get into the playoffs as we're approaching the end of the season. Particularly the defense and the power play have been really a big issue of late. You wrote in your article about their trip to Ottawa, 1 for 12 on the power play against the Senators. That's after going 9 for 31 in their previous 9 games. That is a huge, huge difference and change for this team, and an element of the game of hockey that can be so critical, especially when you are giving up as many goals as the Red Wings have been of late, to stay competitive against some of these teams when they give you an opportunity. So should we expect, regardless of moving Tyler Bertuzzi, that Steve Yzerman and company may be also pursuing some improvements on the defensive side and getting some goal scorers that can be more effective on the power play?
Well, I don't think he's going to sell any future assets, at least not any high draft picks, for a temporary fix here at the trade deadline. I think most of those kind of deals that he'd be inclined to do would be in the offseason. But you mentioned the power play and really special teams, both the PK and the power play. Those are areas that this team really struggled in the last few years, left a lot of points on the table because both those special teams were pretty bad. And they'd shown during that recent stretch much improvement in both areas. But it was pretty bad, like you mentioned, in the 2 games against Ottawa. The question is, it's possible that those could just be outliers, those 2 games, and maybe they are not quite as bad as they showed in those 2 games. But moving forward, certainly that's going to be key. That's going to be one of the keys if they can make another push here.
We're joined by Ansar Khan on today's edition of the Megacast, Detroit Red Wings beat writer with MLive. You can read all of his articles and keep up to date with the progress of this Detroit Red Wings hockey team on MLive.com/Red Wings, MLive.com/Red Wings. And as we talk about all this and the Red Wings being in that hunt for one of those wild card spots in the Eastern Conference, they're competing right now with the Islanders. They're competing right now with the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are in those slots, but also a lot of teams around them as they're currently standing at 66 playoff points alongside the Ottawa Senators, who they've played over the last couple of days. 64 points with the Senators, and then 66 points being held by the Panthers. But looking at the schedule, they've got some tough matchups coming up, a lot of games against some of these teams that are also in the hunt. But mixed in with that, they got the top team in the Eastern Conference as well, in the Boston Bruins, a few matchups with them. So looking at the rest of the way that the Red Wings are going with this schedule, what's your thought? Just how much of a chance do they really have to be competitive enough against this crop of teams to push into that final couple of playoff spots in those wild card positions?
I think it's. I would say it's a long shot. I think again, it's when all's said and done, it's going to be tight. There's going to be and it's usually that way. There's not a lot of points separating those last few teams that make it and the first few teams that miss out. It's always pretty tight, and I expect that's going to be the case this year. And I think they'll look back on these possibly these 2 games at Ottawa, not being able to get a split as really damaging. And like you mentioned, the schedule as of a couple of days ago, I think it was rated the toughest remaining schedule in the NHL as far as their opponents' win percentage and points percentage. So it is a tough road to go. And, now, Philip Hronek was injured last night. It's possible that he could be out for a while. That's if injuries, they had been healthy until really the last couple of games here. If injuries start to pile up too, that's only going to add to what is a tough task. But ultimately, I think there's just too many teams there. I'm not sure what I haven't looked at the standings today, but I think there were maybe 5 points out of that second wild card spot. But I think when you have to leapfrog several teams to get there too, that just makes the challenge that much tougher, and it's going to be tough to get in there.
Yeah, Islanders and the Penguins currently sitting at 70 and 69 points, respectively. The Red Wings at 64, tied with the Ottawa Senators out of the Atlantic Division, chasing the Panthers at 66 points, the Sabres at 66 points, and even looking down at the Metropolitan Division with the Capitals at 64. Plenty of teams in the mix, and the Red Wings having several matchups with a lot of them as we approach the end of the season with the Red Wings' final regular season game on April 13th against the Tampa Bay Lightning. We're joined by Ansar Khan on today's edition of the Megacast, beat writer with the Detroit Red Wings with MLive, and you can find his articles on their website, mlive.com/Red Wings. And Ansar, looking at this season for the Red Wings, taking a step forward in some regards, but a lot of those problems that have been present over the last couple of seasons, particularly the defense, continuing to be an issue. How does this inform where Steve Yzerman and the front office may go this offseason, looking towards certainly the draft? And as you mentioned, those draft assets have been something that Steve Yzerman's been very keen to hold on to and build through the draft, as he did in Tampa Bay, but also in free agency, where last offseason he made several moves that did help progress this team in this current season.
I think what this team really needs, and it's easier said than done, but they need really a bona fide star up front. Dylan Larkin, certainly has been their best player for some time now. Certainly a very good player, but not the elite level star that you see a lot of these top teams have. Now, how do you get that? I don't know. Certainly somehow draft somebody who develops into that type of player. They haven't had, of course, a lot of lottery luck the past several years. But and they would have liked to have made a run at Bo Horvat, who would have essentially been their number one center moving forward, had they been able to swing that deal with Vancouver. But instead, he went to the Islanders. That was a guy that they were looking at. Somehow they need to find that elite forward, because I think on defense, I think moving forward, they're going to be in pretty good shape there. When you've got Moritz Seider and then Simon Edvinsson, who they hope will make the team next year. A couple of big D-men to really anchor that unit for years to come. But they really need elite level, preferably center, an elite level center moving forward. And I do think that they will. Of course, this is Dylan Larkin also in the last year of his contract, but I don't think there's any reason to believe that they won't get him signed to an 8-year extension here, whether that's in the next couple of days or maybe more likely sometime before free agency.
And regardless, plenty of intrigue around this Detroit Red Wings team, as they still have a little bit over a month left in their regular season and are right there in the mix for those final 2 wild card spots in the Eastern Conference. Ansar, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, glad to be with you.
Glad to have you on, as always. Ansar Khan, the beat writer for the Detroit Red Wings with MLive Media Group. You can read his articles and keep up to date with the Detroit Red Wings on mlive.com. Red Wings. We'll take a break on the Megacast. On the other side, the first big name in the Democratic Party has put their name into the U.S. Senator's race to replace soon to be retiring Debbie Stabenow. We'll talk to Dave Dulio from Oakland University about that and more surrounding Michigan politics coming up next on the Megacast.
In the face of COVID-19, staying healthy is important.
And now the same is true in the face of flu.
Influenza has the power to infect millions.
But it's easy to protect yourself, your family, and your community.
The flu vaccine is safe and effective. And with COVID-19 still around,
it's essential. Together we can face flu season head on.
Visit michigan.gov/flu.
It's that time of year, Greater West Bloomfield. Our towns gather together this March for the 5th annual State of the Communities. Important figures from Sylvan Lake, West Bloomfield, Orchard Lake, and Kego Harbor discuss the past year's projects and developments. Hear presentations from speakers, discussions on plans of action, and more. The 5th annual State of the Communities, March 13th at 7 p.m. at the new West Bloomfield Middle School.
Many people are feeling overwhelmed and struggling with mental wellness these days. So be kind to your mind. Give yourself permission to breathe. Share your feelings. You are not alone. Have hope. Talk to a Stay Well counselor for free confidential help 24/7 through the COVID-19 hotline.
Welcome back to the Megacast, our live daily TV, radio, and streaming show talking about all things Michigan. I'm Tyler Kieft. You can find more information on our program and keep up to date with us on demand on civiccentertv.com/Megacast. In addition, links to every single one of our partnering TV, radio, and web outlets that join us live Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., as well as live to tape for programs in the afternoons and evenings as well. All of that, civiccentertv.com/Megacast, as you stay up to date with us across the county on our show Monday through Friday, and in your local area and your hometown with all these stations and the other 23 hours of the day that they're not with us on the Megacast. Well, something making an impact in all of these communities on our network and around the great state of Michigan, of course, is the political realm in Lansing, here in our local area, and of course nationally. And here to talk to us with that, as always, is Dave Dulio, professor of political science at Oakland University, where he also serves as the director of their Center for Civic Engagement. Dave, thanks for being with us again.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. The big news this week, an announcement in the Democratic Party as Elissa Slotkin has put her name in the race to replace Debbie Stabenow, who will be retiring from her position as a U.S. Senator from Michigan, one of our 2 U.S. Senators, after a couple of decades of service. And this is really the first big name to drop in this race across both the major parties who'll be vying for Debbie Stabenow's position. Ultimately, for Slotkin and for her camp, what do you believe was that motivating factor that ultimately led to her saying, I'm going to put my name in the race, it's my time to run for this position, as many have been hesitant to say so far, whether or not they're even interested?
Yeah, I think it's just like you said, it's her time. I think that she sees it as an opportunity. When is the next time there's going to be an open Senate seat in Michigan? I think if, Gary Peters seems to be quite happy in his Senate seat. It's been tough to unseat him. It's been impossible to unseat him because he keeps winning. And if you got to figure that somebody who gets in when the seat is open this time around, that they're likely to have a long career just because of the advantages that come with incumbency. And so I think that she thinks the time is now, strike while the iron is hot. And you're right, she's the first big name to throw her name in the ring. In fact, the big names have to this point said no. We had Mallory McMorrow, state senator, who developed a national following last year because of a speech on the House floor. The Senate floor, the state Senate floor. She passed on running. Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist has said he's not going to run. And the Democrats, the big names on the Democratic side seem to all be sort of taking a pass. Debbie Dingell says she's still thinking about it. Some talk of Jocelyn Benson, but I would be surprised if there was a knockdown, drag-out Democratic primary.
Yeah, and especially now with Elissa Slotkin putting her name in the race, and something that's been quite typical of her campaigns running for her current position in Congress has been her ability to fundraise, her ability to get out in the public eye and get into the media and get her name out there, that name recognition. So with her putting her name in the ring now, a little bit on the earlier side as we're approaching the 2024 election cycle, what does that mean for those other Democrats that may be interested? How does that timing maybe move up now that a big name has dropped into this race right now?
Yeah, I think if anybody's going to get in, they have to do it soon. You mentioned Slotkin's ability to fundraise, and she announced after one day of running for the Senate, she raised $1.2 million. She's going to have no trouble raising money, and I think she's going to raise tens and tens of millions of dollars for this race. And I think that others could have trouble matching that. And quite frankly, do they want to even have to do that? Do they want to commit so much time and effort to raising, $20 million or for the race? And I think too that there's also an internal party discussion that would happen. And the same thing could happen on the Republican side. But I think the Democrats could get together and say, hey, look, do we really want to beat up on each other when we've got a real good chance to hold the seat?
And you mentioned an interesting point, too. The Republicans are going to have a similar consideration to be making right now, too, with a Democrat like Elissa Slotkin, with her name recognition on certainly a statewide level, but even a national level. Her experience in Washington also going to be a huge plus for voters, considering having her replace a longtime senator in Debbie Stabenow. So for the Republicans, what may they be prioritizing right now in terms of competing with Elissa Slotkin, especially given that in our previous election in 2022 for the gubernatorial election, they got ran off the floor in terms of fundraising by Governor Whitmer?
Yeah, I think that's a huge factor. It could be a very similar dynamic in 2024. The Republicans need to focus on candidate recruitment at the moment. They need to find at least one candidate who's got broad appeal. There are some folks who've said they're going to run. A current member of the State Board of Education, for example, and that person has won statewide, but it's not the same. It's not the same kind of battle. I think Republicans need to find somebody who can attract the middle of the road or compete for the middle of the road, because that's where Elissa Slotkin is really going to spend, I think, most of her time in courting voters, and because that's what she's done in her House races thus far, right? And folks could find votes that would counter this, but she's really positioned herself as a moderate. I think you might see that get really challenged in a general election Senate battle if Republicans can find the right candidate. And to this point, there isn't one. And your point about having real trouble in 2022 raising money to compete statewide holds here as well. It's a little different given that the state party doesn't always play as heavily in U.S. Senate races, but you got to look at the current structure of the Michigan Republican Party and wonder if they're going to be able to raise money to the level that would allow them to have a say in or have a hand in trying to impact some of these races in 24. Just given the change in leadership from last weekend or 2 weekends ago at the convention that elected new state party leadership, I think there's questions across the state about the ability of the new leadership to raise significant sums of money. Many of the big funders on the Republican side have already said that they're not going to support the new chair and her deputies. I think that could have a real big effect on that. In addition to raising money, can they put together a campaign arm that has, say, a ground operation that can help in the Senate race?
Yeah, and on top of that, you made a really good point too, Dave, that the Michigan party, the state Republican Party, maybe not going to have as much of a major impact on a Senate election as you may have between the state party and the national party. But even there could be that disconnect as the National Republican Party is going to have its own internal battle. Are they a Trump party? Are they a party of DeSantis? Are they somewhere outside of that Trump-DeSantis realm? And how does that impact the state of Michigan too? Because this is a key swing state in these elections. It's leaning more and more Democratic as the years have gone on, as elections go on. And certainly if the Republicans are able to split the U.S. senators here in the state of Michigan, one Democrat, one Republican, that would be a huge step forward for them. And I would imagine that's also going to be a huge point of contention going forward, because Christina Caramo, now in leadership in the state Republican Party, the National Republican Party, still sort of figuring out where they're going to go. How may that maybe play an impact on their decision making and who's going to be running against Elissa Slotkin or another Democrat that may put their name in the ring?
So I think that plays a couple different ways, right? I mean, as I said, I think Republicans need to focus on candidate recruitment, but the state party can't control that, right? I think that any Republican who wants to can put his or her name forward and seek the nomination, right? So it would be really interesting to watch as say a Peter Meyer from Grand Rapids. He has to be thinking about running. Yeah. I would be shocked if he wasn't. And I think he would be a strong candidate to go up against Elissa Slotkin. I think that would make a really fascinating and really competitive general election. The question is whether or not Peter Meyer, somebody who voted for the impeachment of Donald Trump when he was in the U.S. House, whether or not he could make it through a Republican primary. And that all, of course, depends on who else is in the race. But, would a Meyer for Senate campaign get any support from a Christina Caramo-led Michigan Republican Party, or even, for that matter, from the National Party apparatus? You'd have to imagine that they would, the NRSC, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, would spend some money. But the Caramo-led Michigan Republican Party is going to be front and center, as you say, in this really contentious state, not just at the Senate level, but at the presidential level. Yes, Michigan Democrats have had success in Michigan, but Michigan's still a competitive state. If you look at for instance, the 2022 aggregate vote for state house and state senate, it's almost 50-50. It's 51-49 for Democrats either way, right? So there are a lot of Republican voters out there who are motivated and who could deliver a win for Republicans, both at the presidential level and at the U.S. Senate level, if Republicans find the right candidate that they can turn to, who can attract votes that have been going to Democrats in recent elections.
We're joined by Dave Dulio on today's edition of the Megacast. He's the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, where he also serves as a professor of political science as well. Oakland.edu/CCE for continued updates and programs from the Center for Civic Engagement. And you mentioned this with us last week, but you recently had a conversation about 1 year since the beginning of the war in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine, and that's had a major impact on particularly our national politics. It also has trickled down to affect our local politics as well. And so as we're in year 2 now of the war in Ukraine, and more support, particularly in terms of equipment and fundraising, goes toward Ukraine from the U.S. and from its NATO allies in Europe, just how much of an impact do you expect the war in Ukraine to continue to have on U.S. politics going into this critical election year, but also on worldwide politics as others like Belarus are becoming more and more involved, and China also providing or considering providing some support to the Russian government.
Yeah, I think we should get you one of our international relations experts to come and talk about the international conflict angles of this. But from the U.S. domestic side, right, I think that you're going to see funding for and the provision of equipment from the U.S. to Ukraine be an issue. I think you're going to start to see more people ask more questions about the appropriateness of that, or the whether or not it's wise. I think that some Republicans in the last couple of weeks have juxtaposed the aid for Ukraine with what's happening in East Palestine, Ohio, and the train derailment, and those aren't necessarily fair comparisons, but it's a pretty good, and I think a pretty effective in some circles, talking point.
Dave Dulio joins us from Oakland University, the director of their Center for Civic Engagement. And Dave, as always, before we let you go, anything that's coming up on the docket at the Center for Civic Engagement that we should be keeping an eye out for? As now we're a quarter of the way almost through the year of 2023 and heading straight toward a big political year in 2024.
Yeah, nothing on the pure politics front here coming up in coming weeks, but a week from tomorrow, March 9th, we're going to have a discussion that folks can attend either in person on OU's campus or virtually via Zoom on anti-Semitism and the rising number of anti-Semitic incidents across the country and on college campuses. We're going to have two guests for this moderated discussion. Professor Derek Hastings from OU's history department is an expert on the history of anti-Semitism, and our president, Dr. Ora Hirsch-Peskovitz, is going to join us as well and be part of that discussion. She's obviously tied into the network of college presidents and can speak to what's been happening on college campuses and how folks are trying to confront and combat that some of those anti-Semitic incidents that we see across the country.
All these programs and discussions and ways you can get involved can be found on oakland.edu/CCE. Dave, thank you as always for joining us.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
Oakland.edu/CCE, or search on Facebook for Oakland University Center for Civic Engagement to find out ways you can get involved as well. That is going to do it for today's edition of the Megacast. As always, you can keep up to date with us and find more information on all of our partnering stations and find us on demand, full episodes and individual segments from throughout our run since March of 2020 on civiccentertv.com/megacast. In addition, we encourage you to stay up to date with us on what's making news locally across Oakland County and around the state of Michigan on our local news page. And of course, civiccentertv.com/ICE. That's where we're putting a bunch of information and links to resources that you may need to know as you continue to perhaps deal with power outage issues here in our local area. And as we're expecting the potential for another big storm coming in on Friday, that's a page you're going to want to bookmark, civiccentertv.com/ICE, to stay up to date. Big thank you to Ansar Khan from MLive and Dave Dulio from Oakland University for joining us on today's edition of the program. And of course to our crew, Jared Clark at the studio of My Michigan TV and our director, Calvin Brown at Civic Center TV today. That's our show. And until next time, take care of each other, and we'll see you soon.